Today we're going to be solving inequalities. They're going to basically be actually two-step inequalities. I will tell you that on this video there's going to be some inequalities that are a little bit more than what we actually have to do in our class. They're going to be multi-step. However, I left them in because it's very good practice for when you're doing your equations and you have your multi-step equations. The only difference is we have our inequality sign, because remember, this is going to work just like solving an equation. So I'm going to go ahead and start with 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 24. Okay, just like an equation, and this is our two-step, we have to get rid of anything that is alone on the side with a variable. So we have 4. 4 right here is alone with our variable. So that's what we're going to get rid of. In order to do that, we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. This cancels out, just like we would with an equation. And I'm left with 2x is greater than or equal, and this is 20. All right, now we're down to a one-step equation. We know we need to get rid of the 2. So we're going to now divide both sides by 2 to get rid of the 2. Now remember, there is a rule. We learned this on the last video and also last class. There's a rule that if I multiply or divide by a negative number, that's when my sign changes. Am I multiplying or dividing by a negative number? No, not at all. So my sign is not changing. I'm going to leave it exactly the same. So I have, that cancels out. We have x is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, once I'm done with this, now I need to also graph my results. So remember, we always want x to be on the left-hand side of our inequality sign, and it is, so I'm good there. And so I'm going to go ahead and start then with, and I can start two different ways. I can look here at my sign, and I think I am going to start here with my sign. This is greater than or equal to. All right, so that means that I'm going to go to the arrow that is pointing to the right. That's this arrow right here. I'm just going to make that arrow a little bit darker because this is the way that it's going to go. All my numbers are going to go to the right. It's greater than or equal to 10. So now this is where I'm going to have an open circle or a closed circle on the number 10. So I always start with an open though. I'm going to circle that part right there where the hash mark goes over my number line. So that's showing me it's 10. And the question is it an open circle or a closed circle? It should be closed because this is greater than or equal to. Since it's also equal to it, it includes the number 10. I have to go ahead and darken the circle. And then remember too, to darken your line. I have to darken my line here to show that it's all those numbers that are equal to 10 and everything larger than 10. Okay, here's another one. Again, two-step equation. Nothing that we haven't, two-step inequality. Not anything we haven't done already. So I'm going to go ahead and write it again. This is m divided by 3 minus 3 is less than or equal to negative 6. Okay, so I need to get rid of the 3. In order to get rid of the 3, I'm going to add it to both sides. So this cancels out here on the left-hand side. I'm left with m over 3, or m divided by 3, is less than or equal to. Now remember integers here. This is a positive 6. This is a negative 3. So again, our integer rules are coming back to haunt us. We have to make sure we can follow these integer rules. Different signs, I find the difference. That difference is 3. And remember, you're going to keep the sign of the larger number. So the 6 is larger, so to speak. Again, absolute value-wise. So that becomes a negative 3. All right, now we're going to get rid of the 3 that's underneath of the m. This is m divided by 3. So we're going to now do the inverse, which is to multiply by 3. I'm going to do that on both sides. Again, multiplying or dividing by a negative number changes my sign. I am not multiplying or dividing by a negative number, so that just cancels out. M, sign stays the same, is going to be equal to negative 9. Remember, this negative here does not have anything to do with my multiplying by the negative number. It has to do with this one here that I'm getting rid of, so to speak, from my side with my variable. So m is less than or equal to negative 9. So I'm going to look at my graph. I'm going to go ahead and circle negative 9. Negative 9 would be right about there. Again, I don't need to have everything filled in, but it would be right there. And I have to think, is it going to be open circle or closed circle? Again, it's going to be a closed circle because it's equal to as well. My sign right down here says it's also equal to, but it's also all the numbers that are less than it. So now I'm going to this arrow on the left-hand side. I'm going to darken it in. And then again, I'm going to darken in my line between my circle and my arrow. And it's all the numbers that are equal to negative 9 and less than negative 9. Okay, next one. We have a little bit of a distribution here to do. This, again, is slightly more than what you're going to have to do when you are doing an inequality for Math 8. However, it is good practice for your equations and also your distributing. So we're going to go ahead and distribute there. Negative 3 times a positive p. Remember, I'm distributing to here, so that's going to give me negative 3p. I'm also distributing it to the positive 1. So when I distribute here, that's negative 3 times positive 1. Remember, a negative times a positive is a negative, so I'll put my sign first. And then 3 times 1 is 3. We're saying that all that is less than or equal to negative 18. All right, well, now we're down to our two-step equation. So this was just an extra step that we had to do. So we're going to add 3 to both sides to get rid of this 3 that's over here by itself, so to speak. This cancels out. I'm left with negative 3p. Don't forget the negative sign there. Negative 3p is less than or equal to negative 15. All right, I'm going to now divide both sides by a negative 3. Remember, we kept talking about this. If we are multiplying or dividing by a negative number, we have to switch our sign. So now we are actually dividing by a negative number. This cancels out. P is now going to be greater than or equal, because I have to switch the sign since I divided by a negative 3 right here. P is now greater than or equal to positive 5, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Again, I'm going to go back up to my graph. It's going to be equal to 5, so I'm going to make my circle here on the 5 and then darken it in. I'm going to the right-hand side. My arrow right here is showing me I'm going to the right, so I'm going to use that same arrow here on the right and darken it in. And then again, darken in everything in between, because this is all the numbers that are 5 and greater. This was one, like I said, where we did have to switch our signs. Okay, this next one here, again, we have a little distributing to do, excuse me. Negative 4 times negative 4, a negative times a negative is a positive. So now I just have to do 4 times 4, and that's 16. I now have a negative 4 times a positive x. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and 4 times x is 4x. It is greater than 56. All right, I'm going to get rid of my 16 by subtracting 16 from both sides. This cancels out. Don't forget, I have to have that whole thing here. This is a negative 4x that I'm bringing down. Is greater than 40. Remember, we are not switching the sign at all until we actually do a multiplication or division problem by a negative number to solve for my variable. So now I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. So x is it greater than or less than? It's going to be less than, because I have to switch my sign because I divided by a negative 4. So x is less than negative 10. Again, I have to graph it. Now this time it's only less than negative 10. So I'm going to have an open circle here. I'm not darkening it in because it is not including 10. It's all the numbers that are less than 10. So I'm going to darken in my arrow here, and I'm going to darken in my line because it's all my numbers that are less than 10. It does not include the 10, so that does have to stay open. All right, next one here. To do this, we have negative b minus 2 is greater than 8. All right, got to get rid of my 2 there, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. This cancels out. I'm left with a negative b. I need to have that negative b here is greater than 10. Now remember, we cannot have a negative variable. You've got to remember what goes in front of that b. If you said a 1, you are correct. I could put a 1 right here. It's actually the negative 1. That means now I need to divide both sides by what? Negative 1. This cancels out. I'm left with b, which is a positive b, because again, a negative divided by a negative gives me a positive. But I divided by a negative number. I need to switch my sign. This is negative 10, because 10 divided by negative 1 is negative 10. So b is all the numbers that are less than negative 10. Open circle or closed circle when I graph? It's going to be open because it is not including negative 10. I'm going to use my arrow here on the left because it's pointing in this direction, all the numbers that are less than negative 10. And then again, to highlight to show that it is all those numbers that are less than negative 10. Okay, the next one here. Again, we're going to distribute first. So we have negative 12, negative 4 times positive 3. That's a negative 12. Then I have negative 4 times a positive n. That's going to give me a negative n. Oh, excuse me, negative 4n. Sorry. Negative 4n is greater than negative 32. I'm going to add 12 to both sides to get rid of the 12, since that's the one that's alone. Now again, look what I have left. Make sure you're circling that with the sign to bring down the whole thing, because it's a negative 4n is greater than negative 20. Divide both sides by negative 4. So n, what sign goes here? Is less than, I had to switch my sign because I divided by the negative 4. N is less than positive 5, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So again, when I go to graph, is it an open circle or a closed circle? It's an open circle on 5. Am I using the left arrow or the right arrow? I'm using the left arrow right here to darken that one in. And then it's all my numbers in between that circle and my arrow. And of course, everything past the arrow too. It can keep going down to the negatives, etc. Negative infinity. Next one. All right, we're going to get rid of the 4 first. So I have 4 plus n divided by 3 is less than 6. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides to get rid of my 4. That's gone. I have a positive n over 3. That's good. I want it positive. N over 3 is less than 2. I now need to get rid of the 3, so this is n divided by 3. I need to times by 3 on both sides to get rid of that 3. That cancels out. And again, what is my sign going to be? It stays the same because I only multiplied by a positive number. I didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so it's going to stay the same. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So this is all my numbers less than 6. Open circle or closed circle? Open circle. Everything less than, so it's going all the way over here. And I'm darkening in my whole line here. Because all the numbers that are less than 6, not including 6, but everything less than 6. Okay, last one we're going to do. This one is getting into, again, some extra steps, but it's still worth doing. We have negative 9 plus a over 15 is greater than 1. Okay, I need to get rid of the 15 first because I need to undo what we're doing there, and I can't do negative 9 plus a, so I'm going to have to get rid of the 15. That's, remember, the top divided by 15. So what I can do then, instead of dividing by 15, is I'm going to multiply by 15 to get rid of that 15 there. Okay, so that means both sides. This part cancels out. and I'm left with all this at the top. So that means I have negative 9 plus a is greater than 15. I now need to get rid of the negative 9, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides. This cancels out. I'm left with a positive a. I like positive numbers. Helps me out a little bit. So I have a is greater than 24. To graph that, I go to 24, open circle or closed circle. It's going to be an open circle again. It's all the numbers greater than, so I'm using the arrow to the right. And it's everything in between. And just darkening that line nice and neat as best you can on your paper when you go to do that. Again, some of these were a little bit more than what you have to do, like this last one. But it is good practice for you to do with equations, so that's why I left them in there. I will probably give you some of these on a quiz as well, so make sure that you're ready for that. Make sure you're practicing. Again, it's the same rules to solve an inequality as it is for an equality, with one exception. We must remember that we switch the sign when you multiply or divide by a negative number to solve for the variable. Remember, that's when you do that last step when you're trying to get a equals or x equals something. So if you remember that last step there, it should really help you out.